Hi chess fans, in this video about rook and pawn endings we will look at the long side defense, and in this position white to move would win with the Lucena technique. So let's have a look. White to move, rook g1 check, and king f6 tries to advance towards the pawn, runs into the technique of using this pawn as a shelter. For example, rook a8, and white wins. And if after this check the king moves to the side, the Lucena technique of building a bridge wins for white. For example, as in this sequence, white is building a bridge and blocking the rear checks from the rook with his rook, and white wins. So what can black do against this? In this position, not white to move but black to move is actually one of the very few positions where the right pawn, the attacking pawn, is on the 7th rank, supported by his king, who has gained access to the square in front of the pawn that is drawn. And the drawing resource is rook a8 check. And the key point about this defensive resource is the fact that there are at least 3 files in between the rook and the king. And the reason is very simple. After this check, the king is exposed to constant checks by the rook. And if the king decides to advance towards the rook, this check is possible. The king now has to decide, do I want to advance towards the rook, but then the rook can take the pawn, or do I go back to protect the pawn, but then the checks continue. And whenever the king walks away, the rook takes the pawn, and this ending is drawn. So this technique of giving checks from the long side is the only reliable resource against the Lucena position once white has reached a position where the white king is supporting the pawn on the 7th rank. So the rule that we can deduct from this is that, as a general rule of thumb, if black has the choice, black should aim for defending by bringing his king to the short side, where there's, looking from the pawn, less squares than on the other side, and to bring the rook to the long side. To illustrate this, let's have a look at almost the same position, but on this position the only thing that's different is that the king is on the long side and the rook is on the short side. So as a consequence, if black now to move tries to use the same defensive technique, there are only 2 files distance between the king and the rook, and if the king now approaches the rook, the check to h7 is not available, and as a consequence the defensive resource does not work and white will win this game. And this whole talk about long side, short side, why does it even have any relevance? Well, in many positions the rook and the king don't start on these squares, and at some point as we reach this ending, black has a choice of moving the king. For example, if the king is here, black has a choice of moving the king either to this side or to this side. And when black faces this choice, a good rule of thumb is to always move the king to the short side and the rook to the long side. Thanks a lot for watching. If you like these videos, subscribe to my channel and get an update from YouTube whenever a new video becomes available.